Welcome. This is our 10th Agile seminar on attendance. I was just saying to Faye and Caroline that actually you guys are the attendance geeks. The fact that you're still with us 10 seminars in is really something. So I am so pleased to be joined today by Faye Whittle, Inclusion School Improvement Lead, and Caroline Scotcher, Lead Trainer at Birmingham Education Partnership, or BEP. So over the past few years, BEP have developed what they call the 5 Foundations Framework, which they have used to train hundreds of schools across the country to improve their attendance. It was too good not to share it, so we've invited them in today to tell us about the framework. Faye and Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us. We're delighted to be with you. So my name's Faye Whittle. As we said, I'm BEP Inclusion Lead. So I just wanted to tell you a bit, first of all, just a bit around Birmingham Education Partnership and a bit of history around the 5 Foundations Framework before I pass you on to Caroline, who's our lead trainer and who's going to talk you through the 5 Foundations today. So Birmingham Education Partnership exists for the benefit of every school in Birmingham and seeks to be co-led and build on strengths of all Birmingham schools. And we were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to start working with Washwood Heath Multi-Academy Trust, which is a family of 7 schools in East Birmingham that had started to develop the 5 Foundations of Effective Attendance Practice. At that time, they had an attendance lead that was working across their mat, and with each of the 7 schools started to develop the framework. And we hosted a series of training sessions for, at that time, Birmingham schools. Since then, their attendance leaders move on, and BEP were approached to further develop the framework, which we obviously were really delighted about. And so since September this academic year, so 2013, we have further developed the programme. So I'm delighted that we've got a real multidisciplinary team of trainers with expertise across primary, secondary, alternative provision and special schools, as well as early help. And one of the members of our advisory training team is an educational psychologist. And what we've done is further defined the programme, developed it, and now we're offering the training nationally. And so we're really pleased that both online and face-to-face we've delivered training with kind of large national multi-academy trusts, local kind of partnerships and mats, as well as school groupings of different schools across the country, and also developed a special schools package, which has been really exciting this year. So I'm going to pass you on to Caroline, who's going to talk you through the 5 Foundations. I'll come back at the end and just talk to you about our response to some of the feedback that we've had and what we're now developing as the next steps in response to that feedback. And obviously we really welcome your questions at the end as well. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks, Faye. Thanks, Samira. Morning, everyone. I'm Caroline Scotcher, lead trainer for the 5 Foundations with BEP, and I'm going to spend the next 20-25 minutes or so trying to give you as big a picture, as whole of a picture as I can of the framework, so you can understand what goes into the training or into the day or into the online programme that we deliver. So 5 Foundations is a whole school approach to attendance, very much about building the culture. It is a human-centred, I'd say, a relational approach to attendance, more proactive and preventative, whole school, and it's about culture change. So we talk about that it's the longer game. Yes, there's strategies that can work with families or difficult to reach pupils, but this is about what can everybody do, making attendance essentially come out of the admin office, come out of the percentage number, and what does it mean to every stakeholder within the school and the community. So yeah, we're reframing, I like to say we're reframing that percentage figure really. So cultivating a collective responsibility for belonging. Essentially, we're asking that question that we've written on that on the slide there. How can we make school a psychologically safe and inclusive environment? So ideally, all children and young people want to attend, staff want to work, and families want to engage. Trying to make a psychologically safe environment. Our training, Faye was very passionate, and rightly so. We've had great feedback about this. Our training, we invite 2 colleagues from schools. One, the attendance lead, family support worker, an operational lead that's relating directly to young people and children themselves and their families, and then a member of the SLT. So back to this idea of changing culture. We can't change culture just from one level. If strategic changes are going to be made, which is what this framework is about, and it's what's being demanded at the moment, a different approach to attendance, then it's got to come from SLT all the way down into the classroom and into the homes as well. So I'll talk through a little bit. The first stage of our training, we do spend some time, quite about a third of the time, maybe a bit less than that, on research, the guidance, the theory that really then introduces the framework. So as Faye mentioned previously, one of our team members is an education psychologist. So we have really tried to make the evidence and the approaches evidence informed as much as we can. So a lot of the research we've looked at Education Policy Institute and Attendance Alliance, Education Select Committee, mental health. There's lots of papers, lots of research, which I'm sure you're all very much aware of why we're sitting here today, and the changes that need to happen. We then lead on to the guidance, and obviously the 2 main pieces of guidance at the moment are working together to improve school attendance. Again, that's been updated again in February, so we do look at the updates from that. And the other piece of evidence then looking at what everybody's responsibility is. We also then look at the theory. Oh, first of all, before I jump ahead, we look at that in Ofsted, what's required. So we reference that. And the last piece, I think that's it for guidance. We then look at the theory of belonging itself. So we will look at a lot of research at the moment that we've incorporated is this sense of belonging, what that actually means, where that comes from, the theme of psychological safety and physical safety being at school. We look at the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we reference, there's a new impact ed research paper that's talking about understanding attendance 2024, the key driver attendance across contexts is this sense of belonging and what that actually means and who is responsible for that. Essentially then the research, the guidance and the theory then leads us nicely to the framework. And I think I included, yeah, there I did. This is a nice visual that helps essentially hang your school's attendance approach, so it's meeting the requirements of the DfE documents and how it's doing that through the 5 foundations. So obviously 5 foundations, these are them. Foundation 1, very much about whole school thinking, culture and climate. Kind of like to think of this as the whole picture, who's responsible for what, teachers, families, pupils themselves, SLT, admin offices, who's responsible for what, culture change. So we start there on the wider picture. Then we go in a little bit more to a kind of the framework, I would say. There's the policies, the systems and the processes. So everybody knows how that's shared with the community. Foundation 3 is looking at professional learning and staff development and having a wider range. I'm going to talk through all of these, just spending a couple of minutes on each. Foundation 4 is the implement target programs and interventions. And foundation 5 is a holistic, connecting to appropriate approaches in behaviour management. Under each of these five foundations are then 5 KPIs. And we give this as a framework in the training. We work very much on a strength-based approach. So during the time, we're very much giving time for groups of schools, MATs to come together, very much to look at what they're already doing. We already have such a wealth of knowledge that comes into the room, and a lot of the time in education, we know that we don't have time to really reflect on that and spend some time on what we're already doing well. And that's been invaluable, really, to allow colleagues to sit together, looking at a framework and looking at, well, what part of this are we actually doing well? So we apply a strength-based approach. After we've done that, we allow then someone to start to look at the evidence that we share and highlight what they could be doing even better. So if we look at foundation 1 to start with, which is culture and climate. Under the foundation 1 are the KPIs that you can see here on screen. So 1 is the importance of applying a framework that is given with this training. 2, the escalated approach. 3, considering school environments. 4 is relationships, and 5, quality assurance, which is about placing attendance on all agendas in meetings, on SLTs, on governors' meeting, giving it place. So within the training, we'll look at each of these KPIs, we'll present them within the training, and then, like I say, everyone will reflect on what they're already doing well. Then we share on the right-hand side here, we share digitally and also printed folders of best practice examples from previous schools of how they're reaching those KPIs. Time's then given to colleagues to look through those folders that'll identify KPIs for them. And then we allow the whole room. So if it's a MAT, we move around the room and we share ideas. Essentially, what they're going to be doing throughout that day is completing a KPI assessment form, which will then go on to directly inform their action plan. So we've made it very simple, as simple as we can for what they do the day with us or the training with us, then directly allows them straight to go into their action plan. So it's relevant. So to give you an example of who we've worked with lately, FET has 7 schools over Birmingham and the West Midlands, so this is a SEND provision. And we recently did it. I think this was we broke the training down into 3 separate mornings. And Bray's school is part of the FET Education Trust. They've really gone for this culture change. They've branded it Bray's Belonging. They're looking at their reception area. They're looking at all different, I saw something online last night, actually on LinkedIn. They're bringing the transport guys in. They're giving them mascots into the buses. They're trying to make them members of Bray's school. So very much going with this culture and climate. Very much thinking about their meet and greets. A lot of their children have lots of different sensory needs, so they play music. They make the arrival at school something to be celebrated as much as possible and something to be identified. Their meet and greet on the doors is huge now, which is lovely to see. They're also building in the reception area areas for parents and a notice board kind of asking for, we asked, this is what you said, and this is what we're working on within the school. Very much inviting everybody into the school. Foundation 2, we'll look at policies, systems and processes. And those 5 KPIs within that Foundation 2 look at systems and processes, having an escalated approach. We look at a leadership approach, making sure that it's not just the attendance lead, that there is a team of people around them, and how to implement that, having that distributed leadership model. We look at the policies. We share what's gone really well is having that one-page policy, making that accessible so parents can read it, so all staff read it and understand it. That it's not a 10-page document that only the attendance policy or admin are familiar with. We look at the importance of joining up those policies again, so everybody understands it. If we're talking about making attendance everybody's responsibility, then everybody kind of needs to know that policy and the systems behind it and where they fit into it. And then we talk about the attendance planning, again, scheduling those meetings, who's writing the policies, who's joining them up. From our training so far, the feedback definitely is that importance of KPI 3 and KPI 4, having that united, simple, accessible policy that's shared throughout, and how that joins up all around the school with the different policies we can see there, SEND, behaviour, teaching and learning, how that joins up. And then that links back to the culture that we were talking about, that attendance is essentially everybody's responsibility. Again, it goes through the same process of we share examples, we give the examples in the best practice folders, working with a colleague to what's already being done, and then identifying with other people in the training and the resources shares what would be even better if. One of the training that we've delivered this year has been with United Learning Partnership. So there was a nationwide online model. These are with primary schools, and this is an example. We set gap tasks in between each foundation, and this was to look at the joining up of the policies and how they're connected underneath the title of attendance policy. And essentially, without that attendance policies, the rest don't exist. Foundation 3, professional learning and development. Research for this, we reference the government's green paper. We look at the teacher wellbeing index as well. Each foundation we will introduce with a piece of research or evidence to make it evidence informed and to give it relevance. KPI 3, professional learning and development, very much about this idea of opening up what's the holistic approach to attendance now and attendance training. I kind of see it as what's everybody's responsibility. I'm kind of looking at it, what's universal, what's that graduate approach of targeted, and what's specialist. So KPI 1, it's everyone's responsibility to be noticing. Again, we look at meet and greets. Hopefully every school has got that in place, but it's really good to recap why that is, that eye contact, that welcome to create that psychological safety for any child and young person. We then look at KPI 2, which is sharing that expertise. Often it's the importance of cascading down what's already within the school. There's a lot of opportunities there. The importance of anything that's a relational approach that's going to create that psychological safety. So we reference relational approach, emotion coaching, PACE, and a lot more as well. KPI 3, we look at performance and improvement, the importance of the attendance team and who's maybe coaching or mentoring or supervising that. Especially when it comes to these high needs families, that it's a tough role and can be a tough role. So we spend a bit of time looking at really defining what that role ideally would look like and the effect then it has on staff mental health and well-being. KPI 4, we look at the bespoke training. That graduate approach, so we're here at the top there with the specialist approaches. Looking at CPD, a graduate approach to SEMH. And then KPI 4 is extending that out to that multidisciplinary approach. How well is the school connected and working with the outside agencies? To give you an example, here We ask, again, a gap task to almost do a SWOT analysis or look at what their CPD is like currently, if we're thinking about attendance. And this school really went with this idea of rebranding that word almost of attendance to belonging again. That idea of if it's attendance, I always use the word rebrand, there's probably a better word for that, but it still has those connotations of in the admin office, whereas this is about belonging, connectedness, what goes on already in school that helps that child arrive or feel safe. Is there something as they come in? Is there the Lego therapy and then primary schools will send? What's happening to help them feel safe enough to want to come to school? So this school here, Glebe Primary, did a SWOT analysis of what's already there. Pace, conscious discipline, CPD, noticing, circle time, meet and greets. Moving on to Foundation 4. We're looking at the targeted programs and interventions. How are pupils identified? How are they worked with? How are they reviewed? How are they integrated back as well as we can back into lessons and encouraged to sustain their attendance? So we look at the importance of data and a data manager, connecting up, looking at the systems, what can be done, what can be pulled down, what can be targeted, what's highlighted, what is the attendance figures showing us, who's looking at that. So having a more holistic, personalised and curious approach to the data and what it's saying. And sharing that expertise as much as possible with that system, how the system can work to really help you identify the pupils. Looking at the early assessment and the interventions, emotional resilience, again, the importance of SEMH, looking at adversity and ACEs here. Looking at whole school approaches, values, what's happening as far as SEMH interventions in the classroom as well in PSHE lessons, also targeted small group work, where well-being sits on the school SIP, where it sends on the calendar, how it's informed, maybe going back to that culture of Foundation 1, how it's informed by pupil voice, not just what we think should be happening, but what's actually needed to be happening within the demographic of each different school, which we all know can be very different. And looking at the importance of benchmarking as well, making sure we are linking with the most relevant school with our demographic as possible. Again, we look at all of these, we give examples, we give videos, and then we give time for self-reflection within the colleague and the school, and then sharing best practice within the room or online as well. And a great example of this, it's a local school here, Fairfax Multi-Academy Trust, in around Birmingham and the West Midlands. They really invited their data manager into their attendance team, who now comes to pastoral meetings and attendance meetings and is sharing the coding. Pastoral meetings inclusive of attendance, explored pastorally and holistically. And as far as their trust, so we now meet every half term to help embed the process, which we'll talk about towards the end. That data manager now is meeting in the trust meetings and sharing approaches with Bromcom, approaches with spreadsheets of how they're moving forward, identifying and reviewing their approach. So that approach is now being shared trust-wise with Fairfax. And the last one, Foundation 5, I don't know if I feel like I've spoken really quickly through this, but I don't have a clock to kind of tell me at the moment. But Foundation 5, appropriate approaches to behaviour management. We reference Anna Freud quite a lot at this point. We look at the trauma in the brain and neurodiversity, different approaches to, again, relational approaches to build psychological safety as far as who's my safe person, where's my safe place as far as children with trauma. So we look at this awareness, this culture of awareness and that understanding. Do people understand that in school? What is affected by attendance figures, or sorry, what barriers might be under the attendance figure? We look at the importance of holistic teaching the child or the young person that's in front of us, being curious around them. This links to then the senior mental health training, mental health support teams, how that's accessed, if it's being used. Looking at curriculum really beyond just the academic, like the breakfast clubs, how are we meeting the needs holistically of that child and young person? KPI 3, behaviour as communication, referencing trauma responses, ACEs here. We look at the tricky one of rewards and how the importance of trying to make that as personalised as we can. So we're not just the real importance of not, and it still happens, of just recognising and rewarding that 100% attendance, which obviously is just never going to be possible for some children and young people. So the importance of rewarding the progress rather than percentage at the end. And then the reminder of any transitions within lessons, within school, being off school, coming back in. The importance of trying to have a strategic relational approach of how to invite children and young people back in. Again, following the same thing of what's already being done through shared practice, what could we do that's even better? And a school here that's showing an exemplar example of that graduated approach to SEMH and approaches to behaviour management is the Welsh House Farm Community School in Birmingham. Importance of the meet and greet, universal strategies. They have mascots here for the wellbeing mascots, worry boxes around the school. Wave 2 of that graduate approach is a trauma-informed school, all teachers being trained in emotion coaching. And wave 3, the more targeted responses, school therapist, is in 4 days a week. So at the end of looking at each foundation, each school would then have a pro forma of what they're doing well and even better if. Essentially, then they're looking at the even better ifs for each foundation, which will then translate straight into their working document as an action plan, working out then who's going to be responsible, like any live action plan, who's going to be responsible, how we're going to work towards trying to implement and embed progress towards having an improved culture of belonging and connectedness to improve attendance. And just a few feedbacks here from the takeaways. That's a whistle-stop tour of 5 foundations of attendance. Faye, you still around here? Oh, hang on, I'll try and, there we go.
I am, Caroline. Did you want to just mention the, you're okay for time, we're just on 9:30. Did you just want to mention the group facilitation meetings, and then I'll talk about the focus days?
Yep. So introducing, the aim of all training is to get our attendees very confident in the framework, and it seems a lot to start with. By the end of the day, we're working towards and we're getting that familiarity of what the KPIs and the foundation and where they stand. Post training then, our local schools, Birmingham schools, are offered group facilitation work. So that is 5 sessions, usually half-termly, essentially to work through each foundation to help them implement and embed that. So I think I've got 3 going on at the moment. So it's a great chance to get everyone together to maintain that momentum, share good practice of everyone's action plans. A lot of schools then have a Dropbox to share different resources and different approaches, so then it can be shared between that group of facilitation. So that's for local schools, and I think Faye's going to take over from here.
Thank you. Could you move the slide on for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think we're going to have a look at the focus days. And then I'll talk about the focus days. So, as I said, we're working towards and we're getting that familiarity of what the KPIs and the foundation and where they stand. Post training then, our local schools, Birmingham schools, are offered group facilitation work. So that is 5 sessions, usually half-termly, to work through each foundation to help them implement and embed that. So I think our goal then is to get everyone together to maintain that momentum, share good practice of everyone's action plans. A lot of schools then have a Dropbox to share different resources and different approaches, so then it can be shared between that group of facilitation. So that's for local schools, and I think Faye's going to take over from here.
Thank
Okay, so as we moved into the summer term, what we've tried to do is respond to kind of feedback from the trusts and the groups of schools that we've already worked with, and develop kind of further support packages. So as Caroline mentioned, there is the opportunity for local schools to kind of meet on a more regular basis. That's not to say that isn't something we could do outside of Birmingham as well, because those meetings in the main are facilitated online anyway, and groups have found that really useful. But one of the things that we've also found is, maybe when you're working with a group of schools like a MAT or a MAC, you might have some schools that are on a more challenging journey around attendance than others. And so what our conversations with kind of CEOs have been around is the particular support now that could be given to some of the schools. So, all of the schools have had the 5 foundations training, that actually some of our schools we would like to do some more support for. So this is where we've kind of developed attendance focus days. And really that's about working with the attendance leads, strategic and operational leads in school, and providing, from a member of the attendance team, the BEP attendance team, an opportunity to actually spend the day in school with them. And so obviously the starting point with that would be looking at their KPI document they produced during the training, looking at co-creating an action plan with them, and really an opportunity to have that external support. What we make sure we do within that day, spend quite a lot of time with different stakeholders. So we hold meetings with different groups of pupils, with parents, with staff members, and really look at identifying and supporting how we can remove those barriers that maybe are in place around attendance. And what's been really useful during those focus days as well is to talk about some of those real difficult cases where maybe within the full day of the 5 foundations training, there's not that opportunity to talk about specifics. And then what we make sure we do is we leave the school with a strength focused kind of summary report of all the activity that's taken place during the day. And that really supports the MAT leaders and CEOs to kind of move forward with any particular schools that they're concerned about. Caroline, sorry, if you just flick onto the next slide. I think there's just some feedback there from a kind of recent visit that took place. What we've tried to do with the attendance focus visits as well is that we know that not all schools that we visit are going to have undertaken the 5 foundations training. Other schools might have their own frameworks, other MATs might already have something in place, and again that is absolutely fine. So it's not all hooked into the 5 foundations. So the attendance focus day can take place in a school that have not received the 5 foundations training. If they have, then obviously we link it into the KPI and action plan document. But if they don't, that doesn't stop them having access to our attendance team and the expertise that they have there. And then kind of again in response to different feedback from MATs, we've also recently devised some training, further training for attendance leaders. And this as we've said, what happens next really. So what we've started to do is talk to groups of schools where maybe they might want to do their own focus days, their own kind of self or peer reviews of each other. So we've devised some training where it gives an opportunity for leaders to actually begin to create those tools. So the tools that we use when we facilitate focus days, we actually work with attendance leaders on kind of creating them themselves. So what are the sorts of things that they would include in a parent forum session, or if they were working with students or staff, And again, that kind of group supervision model, looking at case studies and how, as a group of attendance leads across a group of schools, how they can facilitate and support that. So that is something else that we've kind of developed, that we've had, again, Caroline, sorry, you know, some really nice kind of positive feedback on. So, you know, we're continuing to respond really to what our schools are saying. What I would say as well is an important part of the work this term for us is collating the data as well, in terms of, you know, what has been the impact on this for obviously individuals, but also for, you know, on the attendance figures in schools. And I had some really pleasing feedback last week from a Birmingham school that has recently had an Ofsted, and you know, very pleased with their outstanding grade that they've just got from RI, and they've had an increase of 91 to 96 attendance from kind of taking part in the 5 foundations, and a very, you know, some really lovely testimonials. So, you know, we're now reaching out to all the schools that we've trained so far this year and asking, you know, for them to share that impact data and those case studies with us. So that's kind of it from us in terms of the presentation. On the slides here is my contact details. So I would say email rather than phone the office, because I'm always out and about. So my email address is there, and any kind of one that would be interested in finding out a bit more about the foundations or looking at potentially costings around what that might look like for your matter, more than welcome to get in touch with me. Caroline is our consistent trainer. So one of the things that I was really clear about when we started the 5 foundations training and took it over from Washwood Heath is that I always wanted 2 facilitators on the training. So Caroline is our consistent lead trainer, and then there's always a second trainer that joins the group dependent on the kind of needs. So whether it's a special school, primary, secondary, if there's particular kind of needs really that we think would support, obviously mats that might have a mixture of kind of schools within it as well. So so yes, so anyone that would be interested, you know, it would be me you'd be liaising with, and it would be Caroline that would be on that delivery team.
What I'm really struck by is how much your framework kind of almost encapsulates everything that we've heard over the last 9 seminars. That holistic approach to attendance, tying it to SEND provision, wider curriculum, behavior management, school level, trust level, data, all of it. You've got it all covered in that framework.